Brandon Marcello is with us. CBS Sports, 24/7 Sports, and also part of the middle eight that we do during football season. He's kind enough to join me each week. What is up, Brandon? How are you?
What's going on, guys?
Not much. I was thinking about you coming on last night, so much so that I gave Dunaway and Lance and Taylor and everybody the wrong time and said 9:30 is just 10 when you said, "I'll come on at 10." But I was thinking about it last night. I was thinking how interesting it is because I remember the Monday after Ohio State, Michigan, on the middle eight, playing your video of you basically following Ryan Day, wandering around the field, lost, soulless, nowhere to go, didn't know what to do next. His team is fighting, and he's just staring off into the distance. From that day to where this team is now is light years.
Yeah, and it's finally because they got out of their own damn way. They decided, hey, let's throw the ball to Jeremiah Smith. Let's be more aggressive offensively. Defensively, they've been doing everything the way they want to. And for that matter, it's because Ryan Day hasn't really been dabbling in the defense. He's been dealing with that offense. And, you let Chip Kelly, your mentor, who made his name coaching and calling plays offensively, do what he does, you're going to be explosive. In that Michigan game, as everybody knows, for whatever reason, it seemed like Ryan Day was trying to prove a point. And that point was, we're more physical than Michigan, and we're going to be able to run the ball against them. And listen, you can run the ball, but you don't need to be doing it on downs that just made no sense. But anyway, beyond that, Ryan Day just looked like a guy out of place and just completely disconnected. I mean, it was like he was pulled out of the Matrix or something like that and realized that nothing was real during that game. His response, as you said, after that game was just weird. And then afterward, the players took it upon themselves. I know it sounds cliche. This is what happened. The players took it upon themselves. They all gathered together in the days after that game and just said, we can't let this crap happen again. The coaches saw that. They heard about it. And they agreed with that and decided, let's be more aggressive as coaches, too. And it seems like everything's kind of come together here, obviously, in the playoff. They've been absolutely dominant, and they're working up to their own expectation, which is they're the best team in college football. They're the richest team in college football and the best built roster in college football. So why not play like it?
Well, look, if they do close the deal, Brandon, Ryan Day's going to end up being 6-6 against top fives all of a sudden. They've got a national championship. I think it's kind of scrubbed what our opinion is on Ryan Day if they do, in fact, win this. So let's take him away. The other three coaches, though, James Franklin, Marcus Freeman, Steve Sarkisian, whose life changes the most and program changes the most with a national championship?
I'm going to say James Franklin just because he's been there a decade, and the big question around him, much like Ryan Day, is you just can't win the big game. And for that matter, his record obviously is worse in those type of situations.
1-14 versus top five.
Yeah, and they've always been just knocking on the door, and they've been knocking on the door for the better part of this last decade of getting in the playoff. But the thing is that even in the 12-team field, if it existed the last 10 years, they would have been in it more times than not. And now you sit there and wonder, well, if they were in it, then maybe James Franklin would already have a national championship under his belt, considering how they're performing right now. I don't know about that, but having said that, I think his life would change the most. Penn State's life would change the most. It's been a very long time since they've been in a national championship type conversation, and for them to be able to do that and win all these games in a row without a first round bye would be huge. It would cement James Franklin's legacy. It would erase a lot of the things from the past. And it would probably also open the door, as I mentioned, to a lot of the fans sitting there going, well, what would have happened if the field was 12 teams in the past? We've always been right there. We would have made it in. Could James Franklin have won us other national titles when people didn't expect it? But, you know, they've got to get through these next two games, obviously, and do so against opponents that are much, much tougher than their first two rounds.
Am I wrong? I look at this game and all due respect to Love, the running back, and Riley Leonard's legs, Penn State has a ton more offensive weapons in this game, right?
Yeah, I agree. The thing is that do you have the quarterback in Drew Aller who's going to be able to maybe stretch the field at times when they need to and do so consistently? I still don't see that consistency from him in that stretch. But again, Penn State's winning ball games by playing obviously great defense. They've had 3+ takeaways in these first 2 games in the playoff and running the football. They've averaging more than 200 yards per game on the ground in the playoffs because of the 2 great running backs that they've got. And to me, they're set up more well offensively to win a game like this. But as we've seen, with Notre Dame, or for that matter, really in any of these playoff games, including like an Arizona State, which lost, but you need gamers at quarterback, and then also elsewhere on the field, guys that can just take over a game or take over a drive or two for you. And Notre Dame has that. I don't know if Penn State has that in Drew Aller. Notre Dame has that in Riley Leonard. We saw it against Georgia in that Sugar Bowl, being able to run the ball effectively and be able to also keep the ball on busted plays and stretch things out. The big question for me about, though, going into this game for Notre Dame is the health of their running back, Jeremiah Love. He left that game, and he was going to try to come back in, but they didn't need him. Is his knee completely healthy? Because if he's out, I'm not sure that Notre Dame's got maybe the firepower to be able to score 3 touchdowns against Penn State's great defense. And if that's the case, it's going to be very, very hard to win that game.
Brandon Marcello with us at B Marcello on social media. You also see him on 24/7 Sports at CBS Sports. He's on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. And that's the thing about Riley Leonard is I mean, I'd have to pull it up, Brandon, but I don't think I have ever looked at a line from him and thought, man, did he play a great game. But they win a lot of the games he plays, and he seems like one of those – God, I don't want to call him a game manager, Brandon. I don't even know if that's the right moniker that you would use. He's like a guy that does just enough to win you football games and doesn't get you beat, which is kind of like a game manager.
Yeah, but, I mean, he does take the game over when he needs to. He did so against Georgia on that last drive, being able to run the ball. There's several plays in the first half that he was able to move the ball very well. He only finished with 80 yards passing, but that's not his strength. His strength is being able to run the football, extend plays, and open things up for other players. And to me, the key for Notre Dame is I think Notre Dame's going to get theirs offensively. And by that, I mean, they're probably going to be able to score 3 touchdowns, which is the way Notre Dame wins games. Can their defense slow down Penn State's 2-headed running back attack? And then Drew Aller, if he's able to hit 2 or 3 passes beyond the sticks and for big plays. Can the defense also force turnovers? Notre Dame is the most opportunistic team remaining in the playoff. They were in the top 2 nationally in turnover margin going into the playoffs. And Penn State here lately has been able to turn other teams over. 3+ in the last 2 games. That's what Notre Dame thrives on. You saw it in the Sugar Bowl, in fact, turning Georgia over and being able to also end promising Georgia drives that were going to score points for them. That could have made that game much different. That's how Notre Dame wins. They turn you over at opportunistic times and then also turn those turnovers into their own points. Can they do that against Penn State?
A month ago, Brandon, you couldn't have talked me into one of these 2 teams, Notre Dame or Penn State, winning a national championship. The winner of this game, do you think they have a legitimate shot at beating the winner of Ohio State, Texas?
Yes, because one, Penn State's already played Ohio State once, and it's great to have film and also just the one-on-one matchups. You've already seen them. You already know what the tendencies are. That helps. And then with Notre Dame, I think Notre Dame's got the best defense remaining in the field, potentially maybe the best defense in all of college football anyway, when we just look at it on paper. I think it's the best defense I've seen in person this year, up close. They were incredible, I thought, against Georgia, their plan. Gunnar Stockton got the ball out of his hands when he should have been sacked maybe an additional 3 times in that game. He should have suffered 6 or 7 sacks. But Notre Dame is a terror defensively. And I thought that they would take a little bit of a step back with Riley Mills, their great defensive tackle out, their sacks leader, but they didn't. So I actually kind of like their chances against an Ohio State in the national championship game for both of these teams. But does that mean I would pick any of them? Oh, probably not. But I do think those would be much better matchups than, say, what we're going to get in the Cotton Bowl between Texas and Ohio State.
Since you're here today and not tomorrow, I want to ask you about Texas and Ohio State. Texas's defense was a certain level, but if we're doing one of those graphs, it feels like second half against Georgia, down. Clemson first round slipped a little further, and I thought it slipped a little further against Arizona State. Do you have an opinion on what has gone wrong with Texas's defense all of a sudden?
Well, it's kind of been like that most of the season. I've watched them once in person this year. I just don't see them drive to drive being a consistent defense. They allow too much, even across the middle of the field, which is kind of strange to me. But also, offensively, that's what concerns me is the play calling. And this happens in a lot of games where in the second half, if they're up or whatever, Steve Sarkisian, not to say he's packing it in, but they stop calling things. I also think there's some hesitation there with Quinn Ewers and still calling plays for him, trying to keep him out of trouble at quarterback. That bothers me. And I think that's what did them in more so against Arizona State than, say, the defense. Cam Scatterbo was going to get his at some point in that game, but the offense, that was up to them for Texas to continue to be aggressive, and they weren't doing so play calling wise. Listen, say what you want about Texas's defense. I mean, Ohio State's going to be able to score probably 4 touchdowns against any defense remaining in the playoff. And Texas's defense is probably in the middle of the pack among these 4 teams, which is still top 10 worthy, top 15 worthy. But among all the defenses remaining in this playoff, they're the one that I've seen up close and in person this year, and I just go, I don't see anything really all that special about them. They're much better defensively than I thought they were going to be going into this season because of them losing those 2 defensive tackles, but it just doesn't seem, the juice just doesn't seem to be there possession to possession.
I don't know how well you know Marcus Freeman, but whether he loses tonight or wins 2 more games and wins a national championship, how realistic do you think it is if the Bears were to offer him the head coaching job that he actually would go to Chicago?
Oh, man, it's a great question. I think it's a difficult question. My gut tells me from talking to people around him since the Sugar Bowl is that he would stay if something like that were to happen, if it's a realistic option. I think he's completely sold on what he's done at Notre Dame and what he can do there, the changes he's made, the type of players he's been brought in. I wrote a story last week that I think really kind of encapsulates everything about him is that he's turned Notre Dame into a bunch of misfits, is what he called them. And Notre Dame, we know that, with the Catholics and the tradition there, to hear them say we're misfits, it's just crazy. And he wants guys that are just absolutely obsessed with football, guys he can mold and build. I don't know if that's something he'd be able to do in the NFL, though I think he'd probably do very well in the NFL considering his demeanor. But right now, with it being so early in his career at Notre Dame, I don't think he would bite on the NFL at this point, especially if it was and like you said, it'd probably be the Bears. I don't see he'd bite on that.
Now do Matt Campbell.
Yeah, I think he'd leave.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I think he would. I think the time's now, and I think he probably knows that, considering the opportunities that have come and gone over the last 6 to 7 years, 5 to 6 years. And I think that if they came calling and offered him the job, I believe, my opinion is that Matt Campbell would end up leaving for the NFL.
Well, it just seems like a weird fit to me.
Yeah, I mean, he was mentioned for so many college jobs and appeared just to be so loyal to Iowa State. The fact that it would be a pro job that gets him out of there would be so wild.
Well, I'll say this: the last few years is that there's been a lot of chatter about like that there being some not necessarily desire, but some ideas and fittings there that they believe that he would fit very well in the NFL, and that there was maybe some interest in that regard. And obviously, there is with him talking now to them. And I think if he was offered, I think he would leave.
Before you go, it's weird when I see the little numbers, but beside our Final Four teams, the 5 seed, the 6 seed, the 7 seed, and the 8 seed, are you hearing any positive movement forward on us redesigning this by the 2025 playoffs to get the seeding right in this thing?
We'll find out here in about like 10 days when the everybody meets down in Atlanta before the national championship game. And by that, I mean all the FBS commissioners start discussing things. There is a possibility they could change the seeding structure. And by that, you mean not allowing, or I should say, just saying if you're the top 12, that's how we're going to seed it. We're not going to say the 4 highest ranked conference champions get an automatic first round bye. It's just whoever's ranked 1 through 4 in our rankings. That is a possibility for 2025. Any other big changes, wholesale changes, That's not going to happen until at least 26. But those discussions continue on an unofficial level in the background. But it's going to come up here in the next 10 days when they meet in Atlanta before the national championship game. And I don't know if we'll get a resolution there, but I think we'll hear whether this is going to be a realistic possibility. So just be patient. Probably in the next 10 days or so, we'll probably have a very good idea of where they're going to go.
All right, at B. Marcello on social media. See him at 24/7 Sports at CBS Sports. He is Brandon Marcello. Thank you very much for the time, Brandon. And enjoy the games. Always great talking with you.
All right, see you guys.
Brandon with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline.